I'm super happy to be here and talk to you about the Lovable Seamless Government or citizen services. I come from a small company in Stockholm called Veriday. We have a beautiful old missionary school, and our passion is about people, understanding customers, understanding patients, understanding employees, and then helping companies engage their people to create innovation, create new solutions, create a better future for people, public sector, private sector, all over the place. And we've been doing that since almost 50 years all over the world. We are now part of the second biggest design company, which is McKinsey. And it's pretty exciting times if you think about that now. Design is really a top management topic, and for many companies, the main area to drive value and find new opportunities for all kinds of different organizations. The reason I think it's so important that we talk about it is that at the moment, public services don't work. They don't work for citizens, they don't work for employees, and they're not good in quality and they're not good in cost. And that's the same all over the world. And there are a number of challenges that make that even worse, aging population and so on, where the cost-quality ratio is not good enough. So many governments have addressed this over the last few years. There are a lot of interesting initiatives going on EU level, and obviously design is one part of addressing it. So that's what I want to talk about, how design fits into this problem. If you think about it more from a human perspective, I think healthcare is something that everybody can relate to. And as private individuals, you've probably been part of many service interactions, from getting a passport to waiting for some answer on taxes and so on. So it's quite a wide level of interactions. I had a personal experience the last few months. My father-in-law was very sick and had cancer. And in Sweden, the cancer care is pretty top-notch. So medically speaking, you can't ask for more. But still, in some of the meetings, he would go there and they didn't have the documents from the exam that they had done at another hospital. And it's bloody 2018, and we can't get that to work. We've done a lot of work with the government in Saudi Arabia. They have put so much money in getting the best doctors. Ideally, they have been at Harvard and MIT at the same time. They're fantastic staff. They have the best equipment. GE and Philips are falling all over themselves to bring the newest tech gear there. But you know, when patients come, the receptionist is on WhatsApp and sends them to the wrong floor. And the problem is that breaks the trust. So it's not only that it's a shitty experience, it means overall people are skeptical. And probably the biggest issue in many organizations, you have silos. We had a roundtable with Swedish politicians, and one of them said, we're not only working in silos, there's actually straws in every silo. So we're not thinking about the experience and the value on human terms, how they interact with the service. We think in departments, we are measured in departments, and that's one of the big issues. The interesting thing is that now citizens are comparing public services with Uber, with Netflix, and you know, public organizations are struggling because they have a lot more legacy, they have a lot more legal obligations. It's not easy to operate in that environment. But private companies are putting a lot of effort in. 89% of CEOs believe that customer experience is the only differentiation for their company now. So for those companies raising the bar, we as public service need to catch up because the citizens expect the same level of interaction. And if you look at that around the world, if you measure 11 different sectors, how satisfied people are, public services comes number 11. In all countries, last. So, you know, a grocery store, people are quite happy. Federal government, bad. And that's the same in the US and Germany. There's a study, if you're interested. The summary is it's not good. And also on a very sort of simple level, if you try to get a bus ticket in Sweden, you need 2 apps and a phone, and then you can have a digital bus ticket. And many institutions are trying to do this through technology. Everybody's talking about digitization, but ultimately, if you only try to develop things quickly as new apps, it doesn't necessarily solve the right problems or in the right way. So I think the problem here is that trying to hit everything with only technology is not good enough. So my suggestion is, and there's a lot of discussion about smart governments, a lot of interesting big investment initiatives on smart government. I think smart is not good enough. I think we need to think about humans in a way that is more seamless, more connected, more proactive. And if you think about it, there are so many opportunities in life where you could do that, right? So if you think about having a baby, you go to the hospital, you have a baby, and 2 days later, in a little box, you need to take that baby all over town to some stupid department to wait in line because you need some forms or some passport or whatever. Why couldn't that happen at the hospital? You're there, you have plenty of time, no problem. And the government knows what's going to happen next. At some point, that kid will go to school. At some point, that child will enlist for military service. So as a public sector or a public service, we can anticipate a lot of stuff that will happen and support people in a much more seamless way. And from the citizen perspective, all of these services are not separate stores or separate channels. They interact with it overall. And I think there's a lot of synergy between these services, but also at the moment a lot of conflict, a lot of communication gaps, and a lot of problems that cost a lot of money and create bad or even terrible experiences. And then if you think about the bright side, how could that actually look like? This is a very simple example because I don't want to only show what New York City can do. I saw this in the park last weekend in Stockholm. I don't know if you can guess what that is, but in Stockholm there are a lot of people fishing out cans from the bins because they want to trade in the cash to make some money. So here the government has put a holder next to the bin where you can put all those bottles that are to be recycled separately, so those people don't have to fish them out of the trash. They're already one step ahead, very thoughtful, very simple, very inclusive, right? The other one is a special bin for one-way barbecues. Also good service if you're in a park, because otherwise they lie around all over the place. But I thought this is a very nice, simple example how to anticipate what's going to happen and think about different kind of people, what they need. Another fun example I saw in Sweden is a lottery that they tested out, which I find very lovable for an area that everybody hates, which is speeding tickets. And the way this works is, if you're going okay, they will take a photo of your car and you get a lottery ticket that you have entered the speeding lottery. If you go a bit too fast, you get a ticket and you have to pay. All the money that people going too fast pay goes into the fund paying out as a lottery to those that were okay. 22% drop in speed, and quite nicely managing that issue. And I think it's important to think about fun and think about these human touches because it's not always rational. And even an annoying, boring issue can successfully be reframed with something like that. On another level, Singapore government has done a lot to work with feedback. In Saudi Arabia, they have installed a new department, which is a cross-governmental unit that reports to the full ministry and is called beneficiary experience. So they are actually organizing themselves around journeys that go across ministries and functions. So there is somebody responsible for the end-to-end experience of beneficiaries. So if we dig in a little bit more, some specific examples, how do you go about enabling this lovable, seamless government? The first most important thing is to really understand people. There isn't one kind of standard citizen. They're all different. And they're even different from Wednesday when they're at work versus Saturday when they're at home. So the same person has different needs. And what we do quite often is that we look at people's emotions, because we've learned that you can only have an emotion when you care. So if you interview people and you look at their experience, you get a lot of noise. But if you only look at the points where people are extremely excited or extremely sad, you cannot have an emotion if you don't care. So that means you focus on where it matters. And if you map emotion over time, you can see the highs and the lows in people's emotion, and you can triangulate by knowing the moment and knowing the emotion. You can figure out what is driving that. So you know what motivates people. And often you find conflicts. We met one mother in Brazil that, we talked about breakfast and her kids, and she wanted to be a fun mother. She actually wanted to be more like an aunt, and she wanted her kids to have fun, but she also wanted kids to eat healthy. So she has this inner conflict of being a good mom and fun mom, and if you can come and help her with that will create a lot of value. So we're trying to find these opportunities, understanding people and understanding what really matters, because often we run off solving for things right away. So next time you're in a meeting and you come up with an idea, stop yourself and think about whether you have actually defined the problem on the terms of the citizen before you jump to coming up with ideas. Because quite often we come up with ideas based on what we think is the problem. There is a famous experiment Harvard did where you basically have a case study that the elevator is going too slow and the tenants are complaining to the landlord running the building, and they're saying the elevators are going too slow. And the question is, what would you do about it? And many engineers think about running the engines faster, installing algorithms to make it smarter, even to have iPads that tell you how long it will take to get the elevator to come. What the design team in that case found is that the problem isn't that the elevators are going too slow. The problem is people don't like to wait. They find the waiting time annoying. So they installed mirrors, which gives people something to do whilst the elevator is coming. Problem solved. Super cheap. People are happy. It's a really true story, and it works. So just reframing what is really the problem we're trying to solve gives you so many more possibilities. And most importantly, you're solving for the right thing. So before jumping to coming up with ideas, define what problem are we actually solving for. And like you saw in the picture, you can also do that over time to think about how it all fits together. Because the next thing that is important is to think about this not as an individual touch point, but to think about the whole experience. Where obviously, if you're waiting somewhere, can we use that waiting time to anticipate something that's going to happen later? Can we think about how that whole plays out? And when you look at seamless journeys, what the brain remembers is only the highs and the lows and the end. Everything in the middle doesn't matter. That's why IKEA has cheap ice cream and cheap sausages after the cashier, because then you have a good lasting memory from that experience. In this case, we worked with the government to build a framework of understanding how they actually interact with citizens, how to rebuild trust. And of course, there are initiatives then needed in different parts of the organization, but it's important that everybody has a joint picture of how it all fits together, which often doesn't exist. So just visualizing how does the citizen go through this experience and how do different people play a role is transformational, because often people that work behind the scenes, they don't even know why they're writing emails the whole day. So just getting a joint understanding what we're trying to accomplish is very powerful. And then, of course, expectations of citizens don't stop here. Many of the initiatives and policies that we drive are for the future, but we have no clue what people will expect in the future. But if you combine what we know about people's real needs with trends, you can figure out how expectations will change. We worked with a mobility authority in Sweden to basically create a living lab that would help them to test new ideas in real time and engage the citizens. So the purpose of this is make going by bus cool. They're competing with cars. They want to make it attractive to go with public transport. And we basically built the bus of the future as an environment where they can try out how it is that you charge your phone in the bus, that the bus is flexible, that it can adjust to different times of the day, that you take all these sticks out that look like prison, and just quickly trying to get the future to be on the road and interact with citizens and test it. And that can be done in many different ways. I mean, building a bus is a bit more complicated, but you can do role plays, you can test things out on a small level and see if it actually works and get feedback. And in this case, even just doing that experiment shows to the public that this authority is doing something cool and that they don't want to sort of bring the future, but they want to co-create the future with citizens. And I think that's the mindset to think about. But what is also important is that it's not just an intellectual exercise of figuring out what people want and then come up with good ideas and test them. That's where design is super powerful, to quickly get things into the real world. It's also about building capability in the organization, because otherwise you won't get lasting change. We worked with one unit in Värmland in Sweden that basically wanted to install service design into their regional government. And we picked healthcare as the first area to work with, because that felt like it's a good starting point. And we did a project that we called the patient journey. The first tricky thing was, if you want the lady that runs the ambulance services and the head surgeon and some nurses involved, you can't go to a 5-day offsite design sprint. So we negotiated that every Friday we could spend 3 hours with a team of 30 people covering all different roles around that patient journey, of having an accident to going back home. Because we saw that that journey is one that is extremely costly, that has a lot of interconnection points between different stakeholders, with communication problems, people waiting, and so on. And those people going through that experience themselves was extremely powerful. I'll show you the video where you can see that team going through. There are people documenting the experience, people interviewing the staff. One of the team is representing the patient and capturing kind of what it feels like in that film, which is now stuck, but I guess you saw a little bit the feel of it. And there was a nurse in that project that told me in one of the workshops where we made sense of what we found. She said, I've been a nurse for more than 40 years, and I kind of thought I know my business. But this design thing has completely opened my eyes, and I'm ashamed that it's taken me so long to figure this out. Because she felt, being the patient, how people are talking down on her, how she's going down these wide, endless corridors, how she is waiting for a long time. And one of the findings in that project was 70% of people that go into the hospital don't need to go to the hospital. So we did an exercise with politicians, with different empathy stations, trying out how it is to fill your form in when your hand is shaking with an electroshock glove, or how it feels like to be picked up by an ambulance. We told a lot of stories and had videos from different examples. And that combination meant that there was a capability that really could take this forward. And they have now created an ambulance that basically brings many of the facilities to people's homes, so there's less people going in waiting that don't even have to be there, getting infections, wasting time and money. And I think that's where the real impact comes from, if you can actually get a bigger organization motivated to see this through. And it needs a lot of energy. It needs a lot of going around bends and finding new ways to collaborate. And if that works out, this is an example where we worked with Dubai municipality, quite a challenging setting with lots of nationalities, where we basically we did a lot of research, and then we built a prototype center and reduced waiting time by 50%, everybody happy, staff more happy because they can focus on actually helping people than shepherding them around. Everybody got like a barcode customer journey template, so they could see the stations they need to go to, and they could check into each station, and that meant we could track much more where people are waiting, where there are problems. So it doesn't have to be super complicated. Obviously, Dubai has a very fanatic way of making change. After we've sent the suggestions, 2 weeks later we went back and the whole center was ripped out. And we were like, what did you do? Well, you told us we should rebuild it, so we're doing what you... That was just the concept. So that all the furniture was on the street and they just did it. But I talked about co-creation before, and I think that is the single most important idea here, both for people working with you in your teams, but also the citizens themselves. We all have curiosity, we all have creative abilities, we all love improving things and helping other people. So this is not something you need to make people do, this is something you can let people do. And design is just the tool that makes it easier to collaborate and communicate and build the future together. This is a project we did with Ikano, which is IKEA's company that runs buildings in a very difficult neighborhood, lots of social problems, where we brought the community together and helped them think about new ideas, how they can live in that community. And people that wanted to leave then said, just because of that project, I want to stay here. And they built little gardens that they can have together. They had a room where people could drop things they don't need anymore. And that's the whole social engagement that came about also led to new ideas and helped them pilot it. In many governments, there is a big disconnect between healthcare and social care. So that you see quite often, that there are a lot of services needed that play in that gap. And we did one project with Singapore government focused on disability to really crack how to do that. With lots of different stakeholders, work shelters, schools, departments coming together. We visited people at home, and we did 5-minute empathic documentary films, quite touching. The design team that went to do the research were quite shocked and almost traumatized from doing that research. So it was quite sad to see people that haven't been out of their home for 30 years because society is rejecting them, they are scared, so lots of complicated emotional issues. We managed to bring these forward and we created frameworks. If you look at Bobby's radar there, we didn't have the disability framework, but the ability framework. So we showed in what areas those people are able to do stuff. So you could see, actually, he is perfectly able to communicate with other people, he just can't walk, and so on. And that helped see people in a different way. They had their little story. And based on that empathy, we then had co-creation creative workshops with 120 stakeholders each time. We had 3-4 workshops where they then jointly came up with ideas. One of the ideas was to have a moped side carrier for people in wheelchairs. So a lot of people in Singapore have mopeds. If somebody with a wheelchair wants to go out, they could plug that into their moped and go with them, which came with a digital service that's almost like Airbnb, where you can say, I'm going to the park, does anybody want to come with me? And because those people have co-created that, and also people with disability were part of it, a lot different ideas come up and a lot more sponsorship is possible. There was one work shelter that basically, instead of coaching people with disability to go to work somewhere, they said, why don't we use our skills as a platform and bring companies here, renting out space. So they now have 5 companies coming to their center, and people that work there do different tasks, and they are more acting as a coach, helping those companies, which is a lot cheaper, a lot more sustainable, and they have created lots of jobs in the first 3 weeks. So that was quite amazing to see. Another cool example is from New York. They have a tax benefit program for people that are underprivileged financially. And those are people that don't care about waiting in line or all of these nice-to-have experience things. They really struggle financially to make their year go around. But only 1/5 of people that could claim that benefit took it, and it's a lot of money. And out of those people, 1 million that could get free tax help, 3% used it. So then you wonder, what the hell? The service is available, the tax benefit is available, and for these people it means a lot. I mean, the thing that only 3% use is $250, which if you make less than $15,000 a year is a lot of money. So they put a team together of a design school, different government departments, and went through that process of really understanding who are these people, what are their needs, what are the conflicts they're dealing with, and how can we redesign that and come up with lots of creative ideas. They created this deck of cards to communicate the issues that people had in a better way. And then they did different pilots. One pilot was to rebrand the thing, because it had a sort of clunky name with lots of logos that nobody understood. So they called it New York City Free Tax Prep. That helped a lot for people to feel more like, oh, I understand what that actually is. And they also created a service where you can do that at work. Because a lot of people that don't make so much money sometimes have 2 jobs. They can't afford the risk of leaving work to go to that thing. So they brought that actually to work. And it's those kind of ideas. They're not necessarily rocket science, but they're really transformational to leverage what's already available and bring it together with people on the terms that they can actually use. And if you do that as a living setting, it gets better and better over time. So I just want to point out 3 practical things, and then you can already start thinking about if you have a question. There's a really good report about service design in public sector. We can share that around with you if you're interested. A lot of good examples. You can see here a list of where service design is mostly used. You can see healthcare and education are the top 2. And a lot of good inspiration in that report that I think can help if you're interested. This is a way of thinking of where do you start this, and to say there are overall societal areas that we need to think about and design for, but there are obviously also individual perspective coming into that ecosystem. And you need to sort of find a way to prioritize where you start, but always see the bigger picture. And in the end, this is about change. So all of the things that I talked about, you can make life easy and think about these 4 areas, how you drive change. Because if you only do one of them, it won't fly. You need to kind of cover all bases. And then I think it doesn't have to be that complicated to start. It is about finding people in the organization that want to sponsor that. Finding something where you can start small, but also be aware that it's going to take time, so you need to be patient. Have the belief that people want to co-create, people want to interact, but sometimes they need an invitation or a little nudge. And think about who to do it together with, because it's a lot more fun to do it together. It's a lot easier, and it's a lot more likely that you get a more inclusive perspective, thinking about the many people we are serving, many ideas that are around, and so on. So I hope this was a bit of an inspiration. There's another cool presentation coming up about 2 projects near here, so I won't say anything more than that.